Good evening. We were getting our cues straight. I'm Bonnie Thornton-Dill, and I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities, and I want to welcome you to the first event of our 2017-18 Arts and Humanities Dean's Lecture Series. Can you believe it? This is the 8th year of this lecture series. Yeah, 8. And over the years, we have sought to make this series dynamic and timely by inviting guest speakers to engage in thought-provoking conversations, lectures, and presentations about important ideas addressed in their work. We've invited them to share stories that inform our understanding about contemporary issues and challenges. Our aim has and continues to be promoting community, generating stimulating conversations that encourage us to think in critical and creative ways, and facilitating those processes both on campus and in the surrounding community. In planning the series this year, we felt compelled to speak to the issues that are troubling this campus, our nation, and the world. Ideological polarization, stoked by fear and ethnocentrism and often expressed as hate and bias. Our themed series, therefore, is an effort to confront these issues head-on by bringing us together to consider rhetoric and actions of bigotry and malice. Organized around the theme Courageous Conversations, ARHU, Resists Hate and Bias, this season will feature 3 speakers whose work confronts these difficult issues through personal, political, and historical frames of reference. 2 things inspired the title for this series. First, a TED Talk in which tonight's guest talks about the need for courageous conversations. It takes courage to speak with honesty and to listen empathically to views that are antithetical to our own. It also takes courage to name recurrent themes in American history that many would like to forget or believe have been eradicated. We want to promote honest and respectful conversations, and that takes courage. By using the term resist, we declare that we are actively engaged in pushing back against the sentiments and actions associated with hate and bias. We do this to be proactive, not just reactive, in creating constructive ways to address difference and disagreement. Our campus is committed to engaging these issues, and this series is among a number of college and campus-wide efforts to promote listening, dialogue, and action around diversity and inclusion. So we begin this series, therefore, with award-winning slam poet and social justice advocate Theo Wilson, AKA Lucifury. You will hear more about that. His story recounts his personal experience with hate and bias. After becoming a target of hate on social media, curiosity led him to go undercover in alt-right online communities to learn more about his haters. Tonight, he will share some of his experiences and discoveries and tell us how he is using this journey as an opportunity to talk about social justice. You will remember that I said one of our goals is to facilitate stimulating conversations and critical dialogue on campus and in the community. Therefore, I invite you to add your voice to the voices of others who are resisting hate and bias by participating in the conversation on Twitter at hashtag ARHUDLS, ARHUDLS, and in the question and answer following the lecture. Finally, I'd like to thank the Clarice for collaborating with us for this evening's conversation, as well as Busboys and Poets in Hyattsville. I particularly want to thank the staff of the Dean's Office who worked throughout the year to plan and conduct a successful series. And especially I want to acknowledge and welcome to the stage our new Associate Dean of Research and Programming, who joined our staff on July 1st and immediately began the work of constructing this year's series. Professor Linda Alduri will introduce our special guest. Linda.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud and pleased to be the one who gets to introduce our speaker for today, the first Dean's Lecture Series that I get to introduce in my whole life. So thank you for letting me have that honor. Theo E.J. Wilson began his speaking career actually at the age of 15 with the NAACP and has always had a passion for social justice. Battling manic depression from an early age, his knack for artistic expression saved his life and shaped an award-winning career as a spoken word artist, pianist, actor, singer, rapper, and activist. He attended Florida A&M University, which he tells me he's very proud of, and he obtained a degree in theater performance. And upon graduating, he interned as a full-time actor in St. Louis Black Repertory Company, where he was introduced to slam poetry, and he never looked back. In 2004, he returned to Denver, winning many local slams against Denver's top competitors. And in 2009, he had the honor of placing 5th in the world at the International World Poetry Slam. He's a founding member of the Denver Slam Nuba team, who won the National Poetry Slam in 2011. Currently, he teaches poetry with the Art from Ashes nonprofit poetry therapy organization in Denver. And in 2013, he also began working with Rachel's Challenge, an organization started by the family of Columbine victim Rachel Scott. So this is a very busy poet, artist, and social activist who's giving his time for us today. And as you heard, he's also participated in several TEDx Mile High productions. So we wish to thank Mr. Wilson for joining us today as part of ARHU's Dean's Lecture Series. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Hi. Wow, it's difficult to know where to begin with this conversation, but I'll just say that I'll start where I am. I'm now nationally known as that black dude who did the thing undercover with the alt-right. Have you heard about the black guy? Yes, that's me. I did that. And hey, how about y'all come on in? I see y'all standing at the door. Just come on in, right up to the front row. Don't be shy. I try not to spit that far when I enunciate. Just landing all on you, sprinkling, you know. Wow, that's a whole lot more of y'all. Y'all held them back or something. Come on up. You got here just in time. Cool. So, essentially, imagine getting national notoriety for something that you didn't think anybody would ever know about. That was what this was. When I decided to go undercover online, I basically wanted to get the gist of a gathering storm that I saw. I saw something on the horizon, and it's kind of like nothing is more dangerous for black people than white supremacy. So I don't have the luxury of turning away. I have to figure out what the scope and scale of this resurgence look like. So that was basically, I suppose, if I were to assess my deepest motivation. And it all happened because I accidentally went viral with a few videos. I was just talking about the things that I cared about. And those videos attracted these weird people who were trolling me like crazy, calling me all kind of racial slurs and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I've been called that all my life. Why do they keep telling me the same crazy, half-cocked information? Where's this coming from, right? And so the investigation started there. And I think that the number one question that people are giving me about the experience was, wasn't I afraid while doing this? And the answer is pretty much nah, I wasn't. I was more appalled, if anything. And I suppose that what I did was intellectually courageous, but it wasn't something that I thought would put me in danger. When the TED Talk came out and went mad viral, and people started jumping in my inbox, then I knew the game was real, you know? And so I had to assess, what is it that I'm dealing with in this force, this resurgence of white supremacy, the very basis of American terrorism, this kind of hate and bias that it seems that our culture is just now beginning to come to grips with as a force of terrorism. And where does this land in directing the future of Black life? I suppose that I should start where my sense of danger got skewed. My sense of danger got skewed because, frankly, I grew up under the shadow of gang violence. That was my life as a kid. I wasn't afraid of the Klan, I was afraid of the Crips. That's what it was. Like, everything around me said, your life could be taken at any moment by somebody who looked like you. And so when I was growing up, I remember my mother being very wary of the colors that she bought me. I remember going to the store, Target and Kmart and whatnot, and buying neutral colors, no red. My mama was very hesitant of buying me even blue jeans at that time because little kids in my neighborhood were getting shot off the strength of what they were wearing. And so this shadow governed my life. I talk about it in my book, The Law of Action. I'm supposed to get better at doing shameless plugs, so that was my first one. I'll talk about my book a little later on. But that's what it was, yo. My father is a former gangster, so he understood the forces very, very well. And he said no son of his was gonna fall victim to this kind of insanity, right? And so, as much as my mother did to try to protect me, I watched my friends fall by the wayside to this force of gang violence. And this is gonna lead to how I ended up confronting white supremacy. One of the things that my father did was he wanted to take me into spaces where Black excellence was encouraged. And it looked like the Ethnic College Counseling Center. It was put together by a lady named Pensile McCrae, and she wanted to get all these young Black kids from my neighborhood, because I was, that kid in that neighborhood, who got encouraged to think about college, focus on your future, right? So I was in there. And then one day, a lady named Carolyn Phillips came in and she says, I'm from the Denver NAACP, and we're starting a youth chapter. Who wants to join up? And so I remember my parents showing me videos like Eyes on the Prize and all the marches from the 60s and whatnot. So I was like, hey, maybe this will be an opportunity to change something in my environment. I was 15 years old, I decided to sign up. And one of the things that I wanted to work on was a gang initiative. I wanted to figure out what was going on with bringing the young brothers in to get them also socially active and aware. Because when you grow up in a gang neighborhood, these statistics of Black on Black crime and whatnot, right? Those are your actual friends. Those are your homies, those are often your cousins. It humanizes what the media was telling me was such a dangerous force, and which I ended up finding out would be eventually. And so, right when I was putting together this gang initiative, a skinhead murders an African immigrant named Omar Jah. Just shot him dead at the bus stop. And then I remember the city just going cold and freezing at that event, because that same skinhead murdered a police officer named Bruce Vanderjack about a mile away from our grandma's house. I remember the manhunt. I remember that the manhunt was on when we did our first Stop the Violence event, and that there were rumors of the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nation surrounding where we were doing our event to stop the violence. And that was the first time I ever spoke publicly about anything social justice related. But also, it was the first time that I began to grasp white supremacy as a threat to me directly. And that my skin was the gang color. And there was nothing that my mama could do to shut me out of that. And so, because of that, I got curious about them from my teenage years. And when the internet was just beginning, there was a website called Stormfront. Stormfront, I believe, may have been taken down, I'm not quite sure. But Stormfront was just all about white supremacy. Everything you ever wanted to know in the 90s about white supremacy was there. And so I think that was my first foray into it, because I would go to the website and I would see the caricaturization of Black people. I would see the dehumanization of our features. I would see how it was easier to them to interact with the fake straw man of what Black people were, rather than dealing with the identity and the reality of who we were as a people. And before I would leave high school, white supremacy would show up in my life again. You see, I'm from Denver, Colorado, just 15 miles away from Littleton, where the Columbine massacre took place my senior year. One Black person got killed. It was a guy I had just recently met named Isaiah Scholes. So now, white supremacy has killed somebody who I have at least met one time. We weren't homies, we weren't close, but I remember him. And when Isaiah Shows got killed, he was taunted about his race at Columbine High School. And so I saw this resurge again, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Of all the angles that I gotta watch my back, now this is something that's creeping into my life. But I was happily on my way to Florida A&M University, FAMU, the Rattlers, you know what I'm saying? I'm so proud to have attended a historically black university. And my first week there, I'm walking onto the campus main activities building, and a puff of smoke breaches one of the windows, and the president of the university literally runs out and says, turn around, go back. A bomb was detonated on my campus, not threatened, nobody called in, making any deadly promises. It was a detonation of a bomb on my college campus, a historically black university named Florida A&M. You can look this up, the FAMU bombing, right? I'm certain that the whole world is going to descend upon FAMU's campus like they did in Littleton, and we're going to get all the media attention because Columbine is a fresh wound in the country. Everybody's talking about school violence. Nothing. But you know what did happen? The men in black showed up. And ain't nothing like when you see them in real life, when they come in with the SWAT uniforms, the street sweepers, the yellow tape, the glasses, like the whole nine, and like everybody's getting quarantined and pushed back. And I'm expecting CNN, MSNBC, Fox, nothing, right? 2 weeks later, another bomb gets detonated on Florida A&M's campus, this time in the Perry Page Military Building. My freshman year roommate was in the building at the time. Nobody got hurt in either one of the bombings, but the only thing that returned was the men in black. They came again. And this time, before we knew it, there were cameras all over my campus and a little bit of news from the local folks, and that was it. They eventually caught this guy. His last name was Lombardi. That's all I remember. And he was the Pepsi man. He was the dude who wheeled in the Pepsi carts, and he was a racist, espoused Nazi hater, everything they found, and he was convicted for a conspiracy to commit terrorism or something like that, and he went away. And I remember the sudden feeling of, not only is this racist, but I'm in the South now. I have a lot to be afraid of kind of at this moment, right? That just so happened to be the year before the election of George W. Bush. And the dangling Chad, the recounts, a lot of y'all young folks don't remember that, but goodness, I do. And I'm sitting up there like, here's the problem with George W. Bush. His grandfather, Prescott Bush, sold raw materials to the Nazis. When I tell you that on that historically black campus, folks was like, it's about to be war. It was nothing like I can tell you. And what was very, very clear about that was that there is a power that is institutional. It's not just individuals. They can make things happen. Because when those votes were getting counted, a lot of times we were sitting up there wondering, how could this happen when there were so many votes from all these black counties and these trucks that just weren't getting picked up and weren't getting counted? I've been confronting this for quite some time. And I suppose that skewed my sense of danger to the point where there was no way that I could be cowardly in the face of this force. So I went on. It just ended up showing up again and again. And I realized that democracy is a force that you only get when power allows it. That you only get as much choice in this equation as some kind of dark power behind the scenes. And more, that force began to look like white supremacy. But I didn't know that I was in for one more deadly, almost deadly encounter with it. And that is when I graduated. And I got a degree at this point, right? I got a theater degree. I think I'm about to be somebody like Denzel Washington or something like that. I'm outside the club after a fight, and a police officer looks at me, he says, "Get the hell home." And I'm like, I would, bro, but like I lost track of my homeboy, so excuse me while I try to find my ride so I can get home. And the police officer ran up and literally tried to put me in an arm lock. I'm a martial artist, so I broke out, and his eyes got big as dinner plates, like, oh shoot, this kid knows what he's doing, right? He shoved me off of the sidewalk and into the street so hard that if a car had been passing, I would have got hit. At that moment, like a genius, I literally took my sunglasses off my forehead and threw them in his face. I remember my sunglasses bouncing off this guy's nose bridge. At that point, the police officer literally just charged me and threw a punch. Being a boxer, I ducked the punch. I saw the moment to counterpunch. And in that moment, flashes of Mississippi Burning, Emmett Till, you name it. Like all of these images, like this ancestral trauma came up right at that moment. And immediately I was hit with a hook, knocked to the ground. And I remember the starry night and 4 cops just swarming me, stood me up, and I immediately began to yell, police brutality, right? The crowd starts turning around and I'm screaming for my life. My voice is my last weapon at this point, right? There's a door on the side of the club that leads to God knows where. I'm guessing an office, right? I see them marching me to this door to take the attention off of me. And when I get into that doorway, I remember that the black guy normally doesn't make it out of this movie. And that I'm marching up these stairs and realizing that I'm not gonna see my mother again. I'm not gonna see my family again. What are they going to say about me? Handcuffed to a chair, like this cop just starts punching me in my ribs and slapping me in my face. He said, you think you're tough, you think you're tough, you think you're tough. I was like looking at these cops, I'm like, what do you see what he is doing to me? Do you witness what is before you? How come you're turning your back on me? And at that moment, all the tough guy had just left. I was like, bro, I just want to go home. He grabbed me by my shirt. He said, you don't know my name. You don't know my badge number. If I see you again tonight, you're going to jail. And I was like, whatever, bro. I just want to get out of here. Please, let me go. And he threw me down the stairs after he uncuffed me. I barely caught myself. And I stumbled out the door, and outside of the door was a newspaper stand. This was the weekend of the 2003 New York blackouts, and it said, powerless. Just bigger than life. It might as well have been a billboard. Powerless. And I began to confront the situation that I've inherited as a simple result of how I was born into this world. And so, like any hood boy, I just buried it. I smoked a few blunts with my homies, and that was that, right? Went to St. Louis, thought I was gonna become an actor of some type, right? And I buried the pain, y'all, until 2011. My boy Alonzo Ashley shows up on the news. Denver man has been tased to death by police. Now, when I seen his name, I was like, Alonzo Ashley is it's not like the most uncommon name. Please don't let it be my boy, yo. Please don't let it be him. And it's him. And I'm dealing with all sorts of traumatic emotions around that and how there was literally no justice for this cat. He got swept under the rug. And as much activism as I was trying to do at that point, there was nothing to be done. And so, dealing with his mother, dealing with his brother, there was this feeling of unsafety, that your life has no consequence. Like there's nothing that you can actually do to exact justice upon those who would end you off the strength of the color of your skin. And shortly after that, I began to get active with Shop Talk Live. That was one of the things that kicked me into gear. Shop Talk Live is just a place where we have community conversations. That's what we do. And it was supposed to be just for black men. You know, as black men, we gather around and we go into alliance, then we talk about stuff that bothers us. You know what I'm saying? The trials and tribulations of being a black man in America. Thank God we opened it up for women. My goodness. Like, we opened it up to women and it took us to the next level. We were dumb for not having done this earlier. But it became a place, right? This is early 2012. What happens that year? Trayvon Martin. So when the hood needs a place to talk, they're starting to come to my venue now. And they're starting to express themselves, and they're starting to get things out on the table. Then before I knew it, Shop Talk Live became like an organizing platform for the next community action, to the point where we ended up taking over a Martin Luther King Day parade, who was governed by folks who, didn't have our best interests at heart and whatnot. And we're doing all of this. 2014 hits. And that is the year where Eric Garner gets killed. And when I looked at the video of Eric Garner, that looked like how they grabbed me up. Eric Garner popped open an old scab. The trauma that I didn't deal with from my own assault was right there. The trauma of how they killed my man, Alonzo Ashley, was right there. And the only thing that saved me from falling myself into raw, red, terrible hatred was a trip to Africa. I took the Dave Chappelle route, and I got out of here. And when I was in Africa, America looked even crazier. From across the pond, America looks wild, right? But what that started to do for me was put Black life into a whole different other context. When I'm over there on the continent, I went to Johannesburg, South Africa, spent some time in Soweto, went to Nelson Mandela's house and Desmond Tutu's house, and I'm like getting my mind blown and crying and stuff, right? I'm in Africa, kissing the ground, the whole nine. I went through it, all right? But it would be the thing that said, okay, this is a global situation. And this is why I began to talk. I have a cell phone or whatever. I have to talk about the things that are going on, right? My cell phone journeys in Africa started to get attention, right? So like they started getting shared or whatnot. And then I was like, well, let me start talking about issues of Black life. And then I found the writings of this dude named Ta-Nehisi Coates. Who know about Ta-Nehisi Coates? You better learn, you better ask somebody. Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's been called the next James Baldwin. I believe it. His writings on race are phenomenal. But he wrote this paper called The Case for Reparations. Wow. I didn't believe in reparations, and neither did he till he started researching it, but I advise you to look it up. That was the first video that I made based on Ta-Nehisi Coates' A Case for Reparation that went all the way viral. I was like, I'd be lucky if I get 10,000 hits. The thing got 163,000 hits. And my life was just different after that. All sorts of stuff was happening in my inbox. And as I would make these videos and get more followers, the videos would go even further and further and further. And that's when your boy started getting trolled. Oh, man. Some of the things my trolls would say was, 600,000 white people died to free Blacks in the Civil War. You're welcome. Word. Okay. First of all, if you... so if you don't see the flaw in your logic, at least half of those white guys died to keep slavery intact, first of all. Secondly, 30,000 Black troops actually fought to free themselves. And Ulysses S. Grant said that they were the deciding factors in so many battles that basically the Black troops won the Civil War. But you don't know about that, so okay, right? And so I began to engage in all these battles, right? But one thing that hit me was that these memes kept showing up. And then I would trace some of these profiles, and they were all empty. You go there, no picture of your family. You ain't at no baseball games, no concerts. These are just fake. And I was like, two can play that game. Let's go. And so right around then, I created the fake profile, told my boy Quincy Hines. Quincy Hines was like, yo, that's what's up. Because there's something called a targeting marketing algorithm, bro. The target marketing algorithm just feeds you more of the products that you like to buy, and it also feeds you more of the news that you like to hear. So essentially, you're stuck in a feedback loop. That's what he called it. He's like, you're in a feedback loop. Everything that you click on, everything that you engage with gives you simply more of that. That became more salient as the election of Donald Trump was happening, right? And in this profile, I would engage, go to a few places on YouTube. Specifically, the profile was on YouTube. And the reason why the profile had to be on YouTube is because that's the only place that my job's firewalls let through. Everything else at my job's firewalls wouldn't let nothing through. So I would go there on my own time, the other websites, but all of these racist websites had YouTube channels. So it was the most logical thing for me to do. And in that, I began to see the scope, and I began to see the scale. I began to see how many people were actually believing the likes, the views, the shares. I could see it all, right? And then I would type something. I was like, yeah, 600,000 white guys died to free the blacks. They're so ungrateful, right? And there's like, yeah, dude, they're so ungrateful, right? And like, you know how posts go, like they compound upon themselves. And then over time, I said, I've gotten all I can get from this, right? All of this was hyperbolic poison. And I said that one night, like, why am I poisoning my brain? I'm just up here ingesting things that are not good for my spirit. I shut it down. I didn't think nothing about it. I went back and deleted everything. I was like, I don't know. I want anybody to figure out what's going on. This is crazy, right? And I understood something the way that I never understood this before. A lot of these folks are getting reinforced into hateful positions, and that human beings are far more social and vulnerable to groupthink than we think we are. At this point, I begin to see that human beings are like ants. You could see an ant individually, but you don't really understand ants till you see them collectively. And that ideas are like viruses. They just go, man, and soon everybody's got them. And if they start talking about a certain thing, these guys, these white kids, millennials, like me, I'm like the oldest millennial, but that's beside the point. But these white guys like me, born in my time, who saw Michael Jordan be a sports hero to everybody, who saw Oprah Winfrey be everybody's mama on TV, right? Who now, at the time, have seen a black president who is competent and capable and well-spoken and powerful and well-thought, all of these articulate things about him. He's a magnificent guy. And they still come up with this. We're missing something. I began to find the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy. How many of y'all heard of Dr. Joy DeGruy? Please look her up. She does a talk about environmental learning, and that as much as we try to mitigate racism by imagery, you can't stop them dinner table conversations. What your uncle be saying at Thanksgiving? What your daddy say after he get home from work? Dude, I can't believe this affirmative action stuff, man. This guy this job just because he's black, right? All of those conversations plant seeds into the mind of kids, and before you know it, nothing that you say in the public arena can defeat what is being said to them in the private arena. The environmental learning piece has yet to be uprooted, and that is a powerful thing. But the sad part of it is this: race as we know it today, historically speaking, is a European invention that they refuse to take credit for. The only one, by the way, right? The word black is not native to any African tongue, nor is the word white. These words were not native to the Native Americans when they arrived here. And what the alt-right did was they framed the blowback from 500 years of open-faced apartheid, 500 years of open-faced genocide. The blowback from that was the civil rights movement. The blowback from that was affirmative action legislation. They framed that as oppression and said, yeah, it's so easy to target white guys now, so easy to target Christians and heterosexuals now, forgetting that everybody who was part of that resurgence was once the out-group when they were in power for so long. The alt-right grew up in the historical vacuum left by public schooling, y'all. There's no other way to say it. And sometimes I begin to think that the not teaching of history the right way is a part of a larger conspiracy to make sure that a whole new generation falls asleep at the wheel yet again. Because there is a victim situation among white America. There really is. White America, you're victims, legit. But you're victims in the fact that somebody robbed you of the truth of your history. That's called fraud. You inherited this shining empire and were told to not look back. They gave you America. They gave you the largest economy that the world has ever seen and said, don't worry about those black bodies in your wake. Don't worry about the Native Americans beneath the soil. Don't worry about that, right? If you inherited a company and somebody told you about only the assets and not the liabilities, You could throw them in jail for that. That's what happens. Why don't you know that George Washington burned 28 Seneca Village? He was known as Town Destroyer. Why don't you know that Abraham Lincoln is responsible for the largest mass lynching in American history? There are things that are hidden from you about the resistance of black folks. You've been taught to heroize the emancipator, but not those who self-emancipate. That the Seminole Wars were actually the largest slave revolt in American history. That not Nat Turner, but John Horse is the one that needs to be venerated. But of course, John Horse, he survived, right? That Thomas Jessup, when engaging in battle with the Seminoles, he said, this is decidedly a Negro, not an Indian war. They don't want you to know that you fought for your history like that. Fought for your freedom like that, right? The burning of Black Wall Street. Why don't they teach this? That a town in Oklahoma where black folks began to prosper because separate but equal, okay, I can't participate with you, I have to circulate my money amongst myself. They built an empire, and it was burned to the ground off of a false rape allegation against a black man. That's the truth, right? And that not only did it happen to Black Wall Street, but happened to at least 12 large growing black metropolises in the night from 1919 to 1921. So when the alt-right gets told about the ghettos, oh yeah, black people, they drive down the prices of real estate, right? They're not being taught, well, had their communities been allowed to thrive, you wouldn't have this problem. The historical vacuum is what's responsible, at least partially, for the resurgence of the open-faced racism. And when people, white people, are faced with the history, there's often like a denial reaction. That's called pain, dude. Yeah, it sucks. It hurts to be told that like people who look like you did some of the most heinous crimes. Like, how do you deal with that? Where's the emotional coping mechanism? What the alt-right did was when white males were accosted with the history of the folks who look like them, their forebearers, the alt-right gave them an out for the pain. They said, let's go on a fault-finding mission against people of color. Whenever they bring up cops, let's talk about Chirac. Let's talk about black-on-black crime. Their crap stinks too, bro. Look what happens in Muslim countries, right? Yeah, let's talk bad about the Islamic community, right? No, don't look at the crimes that you look at what all of these other people have done. You're no worse, you're no better. You're just like them. And what it did was it baited them onto the wrong side of history yet again. And of course, this don't sit well with black folks. I said to somebody, when you talk about the race problem in America, it often gets framed as if there's equal halves here, that there's just as much wrong on the black side as there is on the white side, that there's just as many people on one side as the other side, right? I believe that one of the things that puts the American dream fully in jeopardy is that black folks are simply tired of this. Tired of like explaining stuff, like tired of talking about this, like tired of having to be the one to represent ourselves in every situation. One of the most painful things about the election of Donald Trump, right, was that we saw a mass doze off in the consciousness of America. And that amount of sleepwalking puts our physical bodies in danger. I crunched the numbers. Black people are about 13% of this country's population, about 13%. How much time do I have, by the way? Am I good? Am I good? I'm good? Okay, we're good. Huh? 20 minutes? That's cool. I got more than enough of that. Just getting warmed up. If we're 13% of the population, and whites are 63% of the population, let's round that down, 60% of the population versus 13% of the population. If only 25%, if only a quarter of that 60% was racist, just a quarter, or had racist type leanings, that leaves 15% of America as racist. If we're only 13% of the population, that's literally 2% of the population more that are racist than every black man, woman, and child in this country. So where does that leave us? When you talk about home ownership and equity, the crash of 2008 took so much black wealth, Oh my God, it literally halved us. And that the Pew Research Foundation says the only community that ever recovered was the white community from the crash of 2008. Home ownership is where the American dream is locked up, man. That's all it is, right? Get you a house and a picket fence. Well, those of us who participated in the American dream in that way lost the most. And in fact, Forbes magazine just published an article that said that based on the current rate of the economy, Black and brown communities are set to be broke, to have a net worth of 0 by the middle of this century. The mechanism is this. When the rate of interest by the wealthy compounds faster than the expansion of the economy, you're going to get richer faster than other people at the bottom can catch up. And that money that they're accumulating comes from somewhere. It's the bottom. So what incentive do we have to participate in the American dream at this point? Like, what incentive do we have not to just like figure out something else? We don't know what that looks like. It's such a scary position. One of the things that hurts is that, like, dude, I thought my grandpa's generation solved this already. I thought we fought this fight already, right? My grandpa is a Tuskegee Airman, man, red tail, you know? Like, I come from people who fight Nazis. Like, this is what we do, you know? It's in my blood, right? So the fact that, like, this resurges again without a Martin Luther King now. You got no Malcolm X. You got none of that. The political will in the community has suffered. I think that when you look at that, there's no Black answer to Steve Bannon. There's no Black answer to Donald Trump. The fear that we have often gets overlooked because we're taught not to express it. Like, we just go. Like, Black folks, we just move. That's what we have been habituated to. The idea that we have to be the strongest of the strong, right? Simply because that's who we come from. Gets ingrained in us at a very, very early age. My mama used to call it the black tax. How many of y'all heard about the black tax? Got to work twice as hard to get just as much. The black tax, right? That's one of those things. And at least a high level of competency. But right now, they say that the average wealth of the average white family, when you calculate everybody from folks in Trailer Park to Mark Zuckerberg, compared to the wealth of the average Black family, from folks in the hood to Oprah Winfrey. If you calculate those totals together, you literally have the wealth of the average white family at 13 times the wealth of the average Black family. 13 times. Here's a clue. In the game of Monopoly, if you start off with twice as much as your competitors, you're basically guaranteed to win. Okay? How do you remedy a 13 times wealth gap among these races, right? It's one thing we could sit in counters and talk to each other and stuff, you know what I'm saying? We could be with each other, hell, we could make babies together, right? That can happen. But Dr. King did a great job integrating bus counters, lunch counters, not so much with bank accounts, right? This is the world that we're dealing with, and we're asked to be friends under the conditions of lopsided resources in a capitalist society. There's only a couple of solutions to this. Either we take the Ta-Nehisi Coates routes and find some means of reparations. And I know that is like in all the dialogues I've been in about race, that R word is off the table. Reparations and revenge. That's it. Did somebody blood go cold? Reparations and revenge. You can't talk about them. We're going to talk about that. That's what has to be at least put on the table. One of the things that was so interesting about watching the alt-right react was that if they were born on the Black side of the divide, they'd be part of Black Lives Matter, like all of them. It's true, dude. The way that they assess race, the way that they assess injustice. I recently saw the play Hamilton. Did y'all heard about Hamilton? Dude, that play is sick. All the way sick. Like, to the point where Lin-Manuel Miranda is like in my top 5 rappers right now because the play is that ill, right? But in there, they talk about revolution and the mechanisms to throw off oppression violently throwing off oppression. They didn't sit in at King George's counter and say, like, we shall overcome. They just got guns and took care of it, right? High taxes, that was it. Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Never felt a shackle in his life, right? So who gets mitigated into conversations, like quarantining conversations, who gets to be violent or not? Black folks can't even entertain that. You're a black identity extremist and you're on the terrorist watch list now. Thank you, Jeff Sessions, right? We can't even talk about that. Under the same circumstances, people who we classify as white would have gotten violent a long time ago. The very first slave ship was an act of war. That is something that we are trying to figure out how to do with that fire inside. When free people want to fight for theirs, what do? We can't even have that conversation. I'm wondering if that's what leads to like black folks having high hypertension and like high cholesterol problems and stuff like that. We just keeping it in, right? It ain't healthy, y'all. Then the gentrification situation, like where I'm from, who heard about that ink coffee situation? Hear about that ink coffee where it was like happily gentrifying the neighborhood since 2014, right? That happened like down the block from where I was born in Denver. Like the fact that like when black folks moved into white neighborhoods, like there was lynch robes, right? There was burning crosses. When you gentrify the hood, black folks don't do that, you know? Like not even the thugs beat up joggers. Like it is what it is. So these conversations are there to mitigate a very real human need to be free. Either we figure out how to destroy the advantage that has been accumulated by 500 years of open-faced apartheid capitalism, or we have to engineer a brand new system. We have to. I looked at the wealth gap, I was like, there's no way to defeat that. If the wealth of white folks stayed as it is right now, they estimate it would take 212 years for the black community to catch up from today. You can't beat the money. Maybe there's a way to engineer around it. Maybe there's a new monetary system that we could create. That would be awesome, right? But one thing that I know for sure, I know enough to be a realist, but not enough to be a pessimist. There are people far smarter than me who have been wrong, like dead wrong, about things like this in the past. In fact, I've compiled a list of wonderful things that people were dead certain of that seemed to be far more unaccomplishable in the time that they were said. First one, there is not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. That would mean that the atom would have to be shattered at will. Albert Einstein, 1932. Wrong, right? When I say, if excessive smoking actually plays the role in the production of lung cancer, it seems to be a minor one. That's W.C. Hubert, president of the National Cancer Institute, 1954. We've been wrong before, right? They say that television won't last because people will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box. Daryl Zunick of 20th Century Fox, 1946. We don't like their sound, and guitar music is on the way out. Decca Recording Company, listening to the Beatles demo, 1962. They say, no, my invention will make war impossible. Hiram Maxim, inventor of the machine gun, 1893. I think that there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM, 1943. What's facing us looks impossible. It does. And I could stand up here like I'm some kind of expert on race relations, but the fact is that smarter people than me have been wrong. And I know that the one thing that we have going for us is the fact that there's a new generation that has this attitude that's unbreakable. When I was working in the hood in 2012, I literally mentored a kid named Trayvon. And it was in 2012 when the name Trayvon was all over the news. And he just took it like, yeah, man, you know what I'm saying? I'm hot right now. It is what it is. This kid's swag was like unbelievable. And it was this young black boy who didn't know the things that were against him. But I was like, yo, like you giving me life right now. Like you're giving me all kinds of hope. And I said, if his attitude stays intact, one of the smarter things that Albert Einstein said was the greatest decision that you have to make is whether you live in a helpful or a harmful universe. It's either way, you're right. If he keeps that attitude, who knows what he'll make of the data points before him? Who knows what he'll see? And so, do we have a lot of work ahead of us? Yeah. But we're living in the world that our ancestors thought were impossible. Like, I literally made it from Denver to DC in like 2.5 hours. That was a 20-year trip back in the day, bro. 20 years, right? And like, you'd be a whole different group of people by the time you got there, right? We're living in the world of impossible, but if we can engineer it, if we can build it, no matter what the problem that we're facing, we can accomplish it. So now I'm supposed to do a poem because I'm a spoken word artist. Like, are you really a spoken word artist? Yeah, I do poems and stuff, right? So I have a poem that I'm about to do for y'all, and it's called Impossible, okay? Are y'all ready? She's like, yeah, wake me up. That's what it is. This is from like my man Trayvon's perspective of the world. He had the swag that said, hey, yo, mister, I want the finest girl in school to reject me, just to see if I could walk off with my swagger still intact. I'm bad. My breath is like Egg McMuffin. Double Dutcher with double mint on my hopscotch tongue. My mouth is chalky. That's what confidence smell like. Girl, you tripping. I'm gonna be somebody, though I know what makes Haley more high octane than a Hummer. But still, how can I ask for a record deal one day if I can't ask for your number? And if Thomas Edison failed over 3,000 times before making a light bulb, then can I use your cold shoulder as a hot stepping stone in history? I thought so. Impossible. Impossible said the horse-drawn wagon to the jet engine. Impossible said the telegram wire to the text message. Said the whites-only sign to little Sasha Obama. Did you know that you will encounter at least 300 items a day that would not exist without Leonardo da Vinci, a man who did not see the inside of a schoolhouse until the age of 14? Einstein failed beginner's physics in 1899. Dr. King packed a pistol before 1960, and you have a dream on the wrong side of a canyon called tomorrow, have cried the river in between, and have misplaced your grappling hook. For just because something is impossible does not make it not worth trying. Who cares that the summit is unreachable if climbing that mountain makes you into one? Did you know, did you climbing that mountain makes you into one? Don't let haters handle your postage. Believe me, my people know a thing or two about doubters. There was a time when the Negro brain was thought scientifically capable of inventing memory and nothing more. Citing, quote, there's a physical difference between them that will forever forbid them from living together upon the footing of perfect equality with whites. Abraham Lincoln. Now, as articulate as that may be, I believe the black folks who dreamed up the air conditioner, almanac, elevator, traffic light, super soaker, cell phone, peanut butter, the freaking pyramids, and fire will disagree. Mr. Lincoln, we got a wireless call from your ego. He said, emancipate that. Show me you're impossible. Tell me it can't be done. I'll show you a climb to a height unreachable is a climb already begun, y'all. Impossible, says the cancerous tumor, to its extinction. Says war-torn parts of Africa to their return to global glory. It says the shooting rampage to its pending place in ancient history. It says the oil company to sustainable being the new word for duh. Do these corporate executives know that we inhale at least 10 sextillion atoms with every breath? Meaning due to global wind patterns over 1 year's time, you will breathe an atom breathed by everyone on earth and who has ever lived. Meaning this poem is likely literally being brought to you by Shakespeare, Joan of Arc, Kennedy, Tubman, Dubois, Guevara, Yeshua, Yo Mama, and all of them asking, forget a millionaire who wants to be a mountain anymore. People who keep the script flipping more hardcore than parkour, reminding haters, your failures are not my border patrol. My dreams ain't your dartboard. I want the finest minds in science to reject my potential and see they can walk off with their faces still intact. Oh, I'm bad. My breath is like humanity, limitless, unbounded, and impossibly free. Thank you. I think I'm gonna just take this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We have time for questions
Please.
from the audience. And if you don't mind, if you have a question, what we're asking people to do is step up to the microphone. There's one here and one there because we're videotaping it and we would like to be able to record you and hear you well. So please don't be shy, come on up, have a question or even a comment to start the conversation.
What's up, bro?
Hey. Where do you think the alt-right comes closest to the truth?
Comes closest to the truth? Somebody asked me that. They wanted to know where I thought they were right about something. The only thing that I could say that approximates anything real from them is there was this tendency from the left to just never, ever hear what was going on. I understand why they didn't, because hate speech is the first shot fired on a continuum of violence that leads to death. There are things that people in the white community are afraid of. It's branded as racism normally. I get that's where its roots are from, but people want to hold on to what they've got. It's just a human reflex. If you've been in charge, you want to keep it. If you've had a culture, everybody wants to hold on to the culture. Is it white Christianity? Well, I guess it is for most of the country, but they wanted to hold on to it, right? And so the fear of losing identity, even if that identity was forged through centuries of apartheid, is something that is a part of the inheritance that of America in general, that if you didn't listen to what they were saying, you didn't understand that there was a human side to not wanting to lose. Now, if they stopped there, they lost, because they don't understand what that gain came at the cost of to other people in this country. But that, to me, was the only thing. Everything else was hyperbole and kind of off kilter. You know what I mean? But what does the Christian right, let's not even call it like the alt-right, the folks who call themselves flyover country, the folks who are most susceptible to their rhetoric, as the demographics change, as people of color become more of a majority, as our numbers grow, the zero-sum game that race is set up as has them afraid to lose, which is why I suggested it's time to design a game that's not zero-sum, but that's a positive sum, that we can redistribute the resources of the planet in a more equitable way so that people are not on the losing end as capitalism would have us be.
Yes.
So first, I wanted to thank you for coming here. I really appreciate the story you had to tell us.
Thank you.
You spoke a lot about how there's been a consistent media blackout throughout your life about injustices that you've witnessed.
Yeah.
In May of this year at the University of Maryland, a black student was murdered by a white University of Maryland student, and that has received significant media coverage, both nationally and locally. What do you think has changed?
I think the ability to sensationalize it in this new context. One of the things, and I think that thirst to sensationalize it began because of Obama. They wanted to make him, I feel there was a push to make him look like a failure in solving the race problem, especially from the far-right media. Sarah Palin said, how's that hopey, changey stuff working out for you, right? Well, that was the attitude of a lot of people on the far-right media. The ability to exacerbate that wound, especially in this new climate, I think is part of what's going on. I don't know why the FAMU bombings didn't make it to national news media. There's nothing like feeling like you got abandoned by the eyes of the world in a time of danger, though. So, and really, that media coverage of the gentleman who got killed here, it made a blip, but far out my way, they weren't talking about that much, actually. You know what I mean? Like, I would debate whether it was that publicized, to be honest with you. But I'm glad that at least folks cared. Go ahead, my friend.
For brown kids like me in this country, we definitely haven't experienced the same kind of, or even the same degree of systemic oppression that black folks have. But in a lot of ways, we're kind of shut out of the larger race conversation. So how do you think black and brown people should work together to take down white supremacy?
Well, I think that there has been a huge push in the black community for intersectionality anyway. I see that push normally coming from black activists most of the time. When I've seen the resistance come from black folks is because they just have forgotten the history of lynch mob culture. Post 9/11, I saw Arabs get the brunt of old school lynch mob culture. The assaults against brown bodies were definitely a real thing. You know what I'm saying? By no means did black folks mean to monopolize the dialogue. We were just trying to survive. You see what I'm saying? So I think that if you look though, it used to just be black and white was talked about in this country. Now there's a lot of talk about brown is often linked in the language of resistance to oppression. Brown is often in there, at least more than it was. Does it need to be in there more? Heck yeah. You know what I'm saying? But one of the things that could be done is to frame it just as it is, a retargeting of lynch mob culture to brown bodies as now the quote unquote Islamic extremist is a boogeyman in the collective consciousness. I think that's one thing that we could do.
Are there other comments or questions? Anybody care to share?
Hi, I wanted to ask you why you thought that slam poetry was such an effective medium to talk about these racial issues instead of other things like theater.
Well, theater does a good job too, but this just don't happen as often, you know? Slam poetry was like the last place you could just tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I mean, you could get it out there, you know, and it's faster. The return on investment was quicker, you know? You write a poem, you read the poem. The poem gets scored and judged, and there you go. Like, so I think slam poetry was also like a great means to get trained as a speaker, as somebody who could publicly present, and to organize your thoughts and to distill language in an effective way. So I think, and also I just sometimes don't like the politics that happens inside of the theater community. I can't deal with it sometimes, you know what I mean? Like I have a challenging personality. That's not good for taking direction. Like, if I think the director is full of crap, if I'm used to like standing up against the chief of police and the mayor, what's a director to me? You know what I'm saying? So I realize like this impulse that I have to fight the power doesn't go well. He's difficult. It's like, I am. So yeah, so slam was the place for me. Any other questions? Who's coming with me? What's up, brother?
How do you think environmental learning will be overcome? And do you think this will happen before that mid-century point where the Black and Latino communities have no net worth?
You know what? If anything happens, it's gonna happen now. If anything happens, it's gonna be because of the hard questions, and the hard questions are being placed on the table before us. That's one of the only gifts I can see in the Trump presidency. When we have to wake up every morning and ask, how do we get here? Like, the people who put this cat in office are shamed by him constantly. You know what I mean? I went back to one of my white supremacist pages, just time as myself. And I looked at this cat, and there's a guy that I follow. I ain't gonna give his name because I frankly don't care. I don't care to give him more spotlight. But this guy is my canary in the coal mine. I knew that Trump was gonna get elected. I knew that Brexit was gonna happen. And when watching his channel, like I knew, right? And he started to like I remember where he totally disowned his part in spreading Brexit ideas. You know what I'm saying? now is the time. How do you have that conversation? By knowing that that's the conversation to have, and to address the fear of loss, the pain of guilt, this idea of white guilt. You know that if you don't have guilt, you're a sociopath? You're a psychopath if you don't have guilt. So do you have the emotional intelligence to discern between guilt and accountability? Do you have the ability to understand that guilt is sometimes a compass that'll lead you home if you do it right? Don't live in guilt. Like having white people wallow in guilt doesn't serve me. I don't like it, and it makes me feel weird, like when it happens, right? But at least to acknowledge, hey man, I'm off course. That's what this emotion is there for. Then when you face the harder emotions, I would say look at the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy. My goodness, she is a boss. She breaks it down, right? And maybe because of the pain of this moment, we will ask a deeper question. Will it happen before mid-century when our net worth is set to be zero? I don't know, brother. If I had a crystal ball, I'd be making way better bets. You know what I'm saying? My lottery game would be crazy. But I don't have the answer to that. But I think that if we use this moment and don't let it slip, we can maximize on our potential for self-reflection.
Anyone have a last question before we wrap up? A last comment?
Come on down.
Yeah, you got to go that way.
You know what? I want to hear from both of them. Go ahead. No, but both of y'all, it's good. Yeah, go ahead, because my man got to step over some folks.
So I was just going to ask, what is your ideal world, I suppose? Or do you have a story of what your life would be like if this problem that you're passionate about did not exist?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. Like, would I be an activist if there wasn't racism? And then would activists be a part of my identity? You know what I'm saying? I think about the pain I have of being born onto like a dying world. The fact that like our ecosystems are plunged into like what looks like permanent collapse, right? So I would live in a world where that don't happen. I seen this one movie called Zeitgeist, and like I watched it, and there were some problems with Zeitgeist. I'm not saying there aren't any problems, but the idea that there could be a way that we could like have a kind of power and energy that just doesn't sap nature, and we can let it be. You know what I'm saying? Like, above all, like if Earth dies, race becomes irrelevant. Like beneath black and white, there's still green. We need to and I told that to the leader of one of the white supremacist groups. I was like, all this intellectual capital invested in this website about white identity, shouldn't that kind of brain power be turned to like how to save our world? You know, I would have a world where we didn't like all the tight stuff was still here. Like concerts would be here. You know what I'm saying? Like air travel would be here. We would just be on clean burning jets or something. You know. Like, keep all the tight stuff, just make it cleaner. Like, how hard can this be? You know, I would incentivize a world where the Earth's resources were shared more equally for everybody. So these fights wouldn't have to happen. Thank you.
So as I look around here, I'd like to think that everyone in here is a good person. Do you think that our generation right now will finally be able to solve the problem that 2 generations now have not been able to solve?
She was more like 13, 14, if you really look at it. 13, 14 generations. Ultimately, there's 2 things that have to happen. If we have the right direction, we probably can. And I say probably because we live in a world of impossible already in many respects. So what if we looked at racism as more of an engineering problem? You know what I mean? Like, what if racism is a problem of mathematics to a certain extent? Like, destroy the zero-sum game, where if one race has, the other has to lose, right? I think that we could, and then let's look within for once. Like, maybe it's lasted so long because people are afraid of their inner world. The inner world is effing scary. There's a lot of crap going on inside people's hearts. There's a lot of programming. There's a lot of conditioning. There is no other game but the inner game, ultimately. You're looking at a world that is composed of the ideas of people. That's it. Whether it's Cartoon Network or CNN, it's all the same. It's created by humans who are doing stuff that is happening in their brain, right? Look within for once. If you don't want to get religious with it, that's all right. I'm not a religious cat to begin with. That's a whole nother conversation. But I'm somebody who's introspective and who wants to figure out what I'm doing to contribute to the problem and figure out how to fix it. So if we look within and figure out what's going on inside of all of us and look at racism and resource distribution as an engineering problem, we might be able to take just that different turn that will get us to where we need to go. That's my opinion on it. Is that cool? No, go get it. Go. Oh, it's all good. You're welcome, brother. Appreciate that.
And thank you. And thanks to everyone and their questions. And we'd like to also invite everyone upstairs. We're having just a small reception. You can speak one-on-one with the speaker and each other, and in continuing the conversation, if you can stay with us, that would be great. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming, and thank Theo Wilson on the way out.
I'll have books for sale, so they'll be upstairs. Take me home. All right.